Hi, mathletes. Today we're going to use tables to graph a line from an equation. So let's start by graphing the equation y equals 2x minus 3. We'll start by making a table. When we make our table, the column to the left is always going to be my x, and the column to the right is always going to be my y. We can choose any four numbers for x, and for this one I'm going to use -1, 0, 1, and 2. You can choose again any numbers and they don't have to be in order. Now let's solve for y. We'll take our original equation, y equals 2x minus 3. Notice I made the y red and the x blue to help you see how we're going to replace the variables. So I replace the variable x with my first number for x, which the value is -1. And then I solve for the equation. So 2 multiplied by -1 is -2. And -2 minus 3 is -5. So the value for y is -5. I'll do the same thing for the next value for x, which is 0. Replace the x with a 0, and the product of 2 and 0 is 0. So y would equal -3. For the next one, we're going to replace the x with 1. So 2 multiplied by 1 is 2, minus 3 is -1. And lastly, we replace the x with 2. The product of 2 and 2 is 4, and 4 minus 3 is 1. Now here's my table again, and I'm going to write these as ordered pairs. So it goes x and then y. So my ordered pair is -1, -5, 0, -3, 1, -1, and 2, 1. So here's my graph, and notice that the origin, 0, 0, is not in the middle. It doesn't have to be. It can be any place on the graph. So here's my first point that I'm going to graph, -1, -5. So go over -1 and down -5. Notice that my increments here are by 0.5. So 2 need to go over to get a -1. And the same thing going down, it's 0.5. My next one is 0, -3. So we go from 0 and go down 3, 1, and then -1, and lastly 2, 1. Now I can connect my points, and I have a line. To show that it's a line, I have arrows on both ends of it, which means there's no beginning and no end to this line. What is the y-intercept? So the y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis, and we always write it as an ordered pair. So it's crossing here at -3, so we'd say that the y-intercept is 0, -3. Now let's graph two lines, but we're going to graph them on the same coordinate plane. So again, we have our x and our y, and I'm going to use the same numbers for my x. But again, you could use any numbers you'd like. So I'm using -1, 0, 1, and 2. I replace the x with a -1. I replace the x with 0, 1, and 2. And I end up with, for the first one, -3. -1 minus 2 is -3. 0 minus 2 is -2. 1 minus 2 is -1. And 2 minus 2 is 0. And the same thing for the next line. I'm using the same numbers, -1, 0, 1, and 2. I replace the x with -1, and -3 multiplied by -1 is 3, and 3 plus 2 is 5. -3 multiplied by 0 is 0, plus 2 is 2. -3 multiplied by 1 is -3, plus 2 is -1. And lastly, -3 multiplied by 2 is -6, plus 2 is -4. Now I can graph this, and my first line, which is y equals x minus 2, is the green line. So the ordered pairs are -1, -3. There's my -1, -3. 0, -2. 0, -2. 1, -1. 1, negative 1, and lastly 2 comma 0, 2, and then I'm not going up or down because it's right on the x-axis. And again, I can draw a line to connect those points. For my other one, I made this one purple. You can see it's going in the opposite direction. And again, negative 1, 5. So I go negative 1 and 5. It would be way up here. Then I have 0, 2. So 0, 2. 1, negative 1. So I go over 1, negative 1, and 2, negative 4, way down here. And where do the two lines intersect? It's right here. So we'd say 1, comma, negative 1. Let's make sure that we didn't make an error. We can replace our x's with the 1 and our y's with the negative 1. So here's my first line, y equals x minus 2. So again, the x is a 1 and the y is a negative 1. Let's see if this computes. So negative 1 equals 1 minus 2, and 1 minus 2 is negative 1. So it looks like that line is correct. Now let's check with the purple line. Y equals negative 3x plus 2. Again, replacing the y with the negative 1 and the x with a positive 1. So negative 3 multiplied by 1 is negative 3. So negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. So again, it checks. So that's a way that we can make sure that we graph our lines correctly. I hope this helps with showing how you can use tables to graph a line and also to check to make sure that your lines are intersecting correctly. Thank you for watching.